longtime friend, he personally and also his family, Senator Risch, and I have known each other now almost 25 years, Senator. Well, one of my fondest memories, being a kid from New Jersey, but moving out to Idaho, was I had the opportunity to go play city slicker for a day, I guess. And went out to the Risch ranch, and we worked about 115 head of cattle. The cattle realized it very quickly that I was not cut out. But the senator was nice enough to let me continue throughout the day and then encourage me not to come back. But we moved on to some really important things, and it's great in our first event that we're doing for National or Nuclear Energy Security Summit to have a keynote speaker as important to this conversation as Senator Jim Risch of Idaho. The senator sits on, is ranking member of the Foreign Relations Committee, is on the Intel Committee, is also on the Energy and Natural Resources Committee, and also has two other duties of, on the Small Business Committee and Entrepreneurship, and then also on the Ethics Committee. So we're trying to get you on armed services so that you can cover everything that we have to talk about today, but I'm not sure that you have enough time in your schedule. But with that, Senator, I'm going to turn it over to you and welcome you to the podium. And please, everyone, give a strong round of support and applause for Senator Risch.
Brian, you were quite modest about your cowboy life. My sons tell me you were big in all the watering holes that the cowboys where you met my sons. Anyway, thanks so much for that kind introduction. I'm gonna talk here for a little bit, and then we'll take a few questions too. It's good to see this gathering. It's always good to see a summit like this on nuclear energy. There isn't enough of it in the way I see it. As Brian indicated to you, I've got a long history with nuclear, and my work in the Senate is a confluence of the. I'm ranking member on Foreign Relations. I'm the senior Republican on the Intelligence Committee. And I'm a senior member of the Energy and Natural Resources Committee. I've been on all those committees since I've been here. I've got, but as Brian said, we go back a long ways. Vicki and I have been married 55 years. We ran 36 elections together. And Brian was part of those. So I've been around a long time. When it comes to discussing nuclear energy in the United States Senate, it's a certainty because of the committee that I have that it's going to cross my path simply because of the portfolio that I have. But my interest in nuclear energy started long before my committee involvement. I represent Idaho, which is not just home to one of the Department of Energy's national labs, but it's the flagship lab for nuclear energy. The Idaho National Lab, birthplace of nuclear energy, dare I say, in the universe. Whenever I called it the flagship, Ernie Moniz always used to say, yeah, but not the only nuclear lab. And I used to say, but it should be. In any event, it is the flagship lab where nuclear energy was invented. INL is more than America's premier nuclear energy research institution. It's the world's premier nuclear energy institution. I always brag to Mark that my first trip to the lab was in 1975 as a young state senator, so I date my relationship with the lab back to that date. It is, of course, a very different place today than it was then. I probably got seniority of everybody at the lab with that date, don't I, Mark? I would think, 1975. INL has a rich history dating from the dawn of commercial nuclear power to the launch of the nuclear navy. These breakthroughs and subsequent scientific tools have helped advance America's energy needs, achieve medical breakthroughs and push forward advanced manufacturing and protect our national security, a matter really important to me and to America. Nuclear energy and Idaho go hand in hand. In December 1951, the INL first demonstrated that nuclear fission could generate power, and we still have the first 3 light bulbs lit by nuclear power there. 4 years later, in July 1955, Arco, which is a small town just outside the lab, became the first city in the world lit by nuclear-generated electricity. Since that cold day in 1951, researchers have designed, constructed, and tested 52 pioneering nuclear reactors at INL, and this tremendous work continues today. INL's valuable research lays the groundwork for extending the life of the nuclear fleet, demonstrating advanced nuclear technologies, and is a major player in fortifying the grid and other critical infrastructure from cyber attacks, among its many missions. The cyber security issue is becoming a very large issue at the lab. Let's look to the current future landscape for nuclear. There's a right path forward, and that requires America to remain committed to nuclear energy as one of the central pillars of our domestic energy policy. Nuclear energy accounts for about 18% of America's electricity. Nearly 1/5 of our homes, hospitals, schools, factories, grocery stores, and all else runs every day on nuclear energy. But despite these benefits, the previous few decades, as we all know, have not been as bright for nuclear energy. For over 30 years, no new nuclear reactor was built in the U.S. Reactors in our existing fleet were shutting down, and the U.S. wasn't making the investments in research and development it needed to. Fortunately, in recent years, this has been changing. A number of states have moved to remove nuclear moratoriums. Congress has passed various authorizations and appropriations to support nuclear research, demonstration, and commercialization. INL and others have conducted groundbreaking research, and this year the Vogtle 3 became the first new reactor to come online in 3 decades. Good news. And this makes sense. Everyone in this room knows that nuclear is the future. It is the only path forward for large load production, as other sources slow down, shut down for a variety of reasons. Nuclear will be there, and it's going to take us into the future. We need to keep this momentum going, look for innovative ways, and work to keep our existing fleet online, competitive, and economically viable, and demonstrate that America can build these cutting-edge technologies. The U.S. is on the cusp of doing just that. The INL, in partnership with private industry, is slated to have reactors 53 and 54 come online as early as next year. The Marble reactor, which will come in late 2024, early 2025, will unlock our ability to test and research micro-reactor technology. The world, believe me, is excited about the micro-reactor, which will come. Project Pele reactor is expected to shortly follow and will demonstrate mobile reactor technology, leading us to have safe, reliable energy anywhere. This will provide a host of benefits, including to our national defense. The Army stated that 52% of the military casualties in Iraq and Afghanistan occurred during land transport missions, including transportation of fuel. During the drive to Baghdad in 2023, General Mattis, Mad Dog Mattis, as we call him, stated, quote, "Unleash us from the tether of fuel." The mobile microreactor will provide the ability to reduce war zone vulnerability and ultimately save American lives. It will also allow us to dispatch energy quickly in the wake of natural disasters and have reliable energy in the most remote corners of the world. These 2 reactors are only the beginning. Over the next decade, there are a host of new technologies in microreactors, small modular reactors, and other advanced technologies that will begin demonstration and even commercialization. This is important, of course, for deploying clean, reliable baseload power, but also for continuing America's posture as the global leader in nuclear energy. Failure to make nuclear a national priority is not an option, because failure will risk our economy, environment, national national security, and indeed, world leadership. As we look across the world, more nuclear reactors are being constructed overseas. Many countries in the developing world now constitute a growing demand for nuclear energy. We all know that. Russia and China are collectively dominating this market. I'm unhappy to report, securing 87% of the deals signed since 2017. 87%. The free world needs to do better, and we can. Russia remains in the dominant position in this market, and it seeks to deepen this primacy across the entire nuclear supply chain. Russian success in securing international agreements are not just short-term wins for Rosatom, the Russian State Nuclear Energy Corporation. These agreements lock in multi-generational dependencies on Russian energy supplies, which yield significant influence over the foreign policy and economic behavior of their partners. Even more timely, it has a dangerous grip on the world's access to enriched uranium. As a side note, the attack it has undertaken on Ukraine is going to set Russia back for generations. And that's particularly true as it relates to the free world. That's a lengthy discussion for another day, but it's going to happen. China has also surged to the forefront in developing new nuclear technologies. Due to the demand of its domestic market, China has become the global leader in nuclear construction with 21 reactors currently under construction. Nearly limitless state financing will allow the Chinese to offer generous financing terms to prospective customers, leaving it well positioned to backfill any losses Russian industry suffers because of its invasion of Ukraine. And it will suffer those kind of losses. Bottom line, both our principal strategic rivals are already competing for long-term geoeconomic dominance in this space. The United States and its partners need to move with urgency, or we will continue to yield significant economic and foreign policy influence to our rivals. Russia, China, and others are moving forward. Undoubtedly happy to see the U.S. seemingly can't get out of its own way. Unfortunately, our competitors see small victories anytime there are shortfalls in permitting, and there often are, bureaucratic disagreements, and there often are, premature closure or other abandonment of construction projects. While competitors may see our shortfalls as good, it should be cause for concern for the rest of the world. To date, the U.S. has set the world standards on nuclear safety and non-proliferation, both important issues. We do that in part by building nuclear power plants in other countries, where our technology, we also export our values and standards. We as Americans cannot abdicate our world leadership by marching backwards on nuclear energy, and the global community cannot accept standards set by problematic regimes like those in Beijing and Moscow, who, by the way, have aggressively lust for the ability to do that. The Chinese and Russians could care less about nuclear proliferation. When they build a nuclear plant outside their borders, they want a contract, cash, and most importantly, control that comes with it. The Russian government understands this long-term influence, and that's why Rosatom has been contracting to build new reactors across Africa. We're all familiar with that. With each new Russian reactor comes more power for the Kremlin, more power, more influence, and a greater danger that Russia could one day set the world standards for nuclear power safety, or worse yet, non-proliferation. That would be a catastrophe. Russia cannot have that influence. I'm working on several efforts in Congress right now to this very end. First, our most immediate and pressing need is to end our dependence on Russian fuel. This takes a two-pronged approach. Number one, ban Russian fuel, but of course, support the creation of a domestic nuclear fuel supply chain. Congress must provide the resources and environment and the encouragement necessary to create a domestic uranium conversion and enrichment, while providing certainty that the U.S., regardless of the price of Russian fuel, will continue to produce for ourselves. These supply chain issues are a constant conversation in Congress. It first came to light, I think, when we had the pandemic, and we saw the kinds of things that the supply chain problem caused us. It now has moved over into obviously the military-industrial complex. And when we see what we're getting a lot of our parts from, it's causing Congress great concern. The fuel, the nuclear fuel, is paramount to everything else nuclear, which is why this simply must be our immediate, urgent, and top priority, or the rest of our civil nuclear efforts will stall. It is a significant national security issue. This is a significant national security issue. To this end, I partnered with Senators Brasso and Manchin to introduce the Nuclear Fuel Security Act. Our bill will create a program at the Department of Energy to support fuel for both the existing fleet and advanced reactors, and to push a domestic enriched uranium industry. We also introduced legislation that will phase down and eventually ban the import of Russian fuel. Both of these bills sailed through the Energy Committee. Now that may not seem like a big deal to you, but when you sit on the committee, when you see something go through a committee like that, it's encouraging. Even more importantly, we offered the Nuclear Fuel Security Act as an amendment to the National Defense Act, Authorization Act, and it passed the Senate 96-3. Not much passes the Senate, 96-3. Almost nothing garners such strong bipartisan vote. If I could choose only one thing to demonstrate the change in sentiment and the momentum for nuclear compared to a couple of decades ago, it would be that strong show of support. We're pushing hard to pass both the Nuclear Fuel Security Act, funding for fuel, and Russian legislation ban this year. This is an urgent issue Congress must get done for energy security and for national security. As we solve our fuel supply issue, we need to look at the reactor supply chain more broadly. The U.S. can and should be the supplier to the world. The export of a nuclear reactor is not a single transaction, but the beginning of a 100-year relationship. There is global demand for nuclear, both as a clean energy and as a reliable one. I deal with other countries every day, and people from the top all the way down, and I can tell you unequivocally, where possible, most every country in the world would prefer to do business with the United States of America. But if we aren't up to the task, Russia and China will happily fill the gaps, and they have. This shows the important and immediate need to improve and streamline our nuclear export strategy. The U.S. has people working on nuclear exports at a whole host of agencies, from State Department, Energy Department, Commerce Department, Defense Department, and everywhere in between. With so many people, with that many competing interests and specialties, there is a need for constant and consistent leadership to create and guide our country toward a shared goal. This, paired with how critical and timely this issue is, means leadership must come from the top and all levels, from people who have a real understanding, and most importantly, a real commitment to America's national security. So, with that, I think, let me just close and say that I've worked with Senator Manchin to introduce the International Nuclear Energy Act to address the issue. Our bill will bring all of these various agencies together and have them report to a central figure at the White House. So with that, I want to take a few questions. There are challenges here, real challenges. You in this room will actually be the ones who move us forward on these challenges, which I say are more than just commercial interest. These are matters truly of national security importance. Thank you for what you do.
We already see some hands raised, and I'm going to be mindful of time too, so I'm going to get Ayla to tell me, Ryan, when you tell me when you're ready. They run my mind. Why don't I just start on the last point you were just making. And we do have an international audience here, so in a little bit we're going to hear from embassies from Poland, Korea, Sweden, and Romania. And those relationships are obviously very important. The importance of some of that legislation I just mentioned, I need at the end, the coordination and getting things actually into the year. Are you getting any sense of any pushback, or and I ask that only because there are things the administration, it's great legislation, there are things they could just do. They don't need to wait, but the continuity of the legislation is obviously very important.
It is, and there are people in the administration that understand this. I have to say that I'm disappointed, and probably always will be, regardless of their enthusiasm. But there's not the enthusiasm I'd like to see in the administration. I think that unless you work in this industry, unless you work in this field, unless you actually come across the issues on this, it just isn't forefront in your mind. We've got there's a lot of focus on wokeness and things like that that are distracting from the things that we do. So there's some of that there. One of the worst problems, and I don't even tell this from that, everybody here knows this, is our departments, whether it's energy or defense or commerce or anything, they're stovepiped really bad. They just don't talk to each other. And it's just stunning to me how you can actually have, you clearly have different levels of enthusiasm in different agencies, but you also have a different level of commitment to how important this issue really is to America. I think the good news is I think there's some wake up coming, especially when you talk with I talk with people in the administration all the time that are really unaware of the proliferation of Chinese and Russian, for that matter, French technology out in the globe. People are still living from decades back when the U.S. was the player, the only player. Things have changed.
I saw you earlier this year at the Security Summit. You've got a lot on your plate, obviously, with China, and I kind of refer to their policy. No comment needed, but I refer to it as it's a belt and road, but more of a belt you into submission, but that's a concern beyond energy as well, and you're dealing with a lot on your plate.
Yeah. Well, that's true. I mean, look, China's going to be our issue. Russia's a problem right now, but that's going to go away at some point in time here in the not too distant future. But China's going to be there for the rest of this century. I mean, they are where they've got. Vic and I had the opportunity to travel to China in 1983. And I left there thinking, and I commented at the time, I said, we're never going to have to worry about this country. I mean, they had nothing. They were all standing around in olive drab clothes with a red star on their hat, carrying a little red book, and all looking at each other. But there was nothing happening. They didn't have toilets, they didn't have telephones, they had nothing. And look where they've come in the decades. They've done it the old-fashioned way. They've stolen every good idea that we have, with the exception of our freedoms and democracy and the good kinds of things that we have. They've got real challenges internally with what we have, but they're committed to communism. I mean, they will argue with you. A good example was COVID. You'd think that they would have some amount of remorse about turning COVID loose on the world. They shrugged their shoulders. It was a problem. We took care of it. You guys couldn't. That's proof positive. Our system's better than your system. They believe it. They really believe it.
Interesting. You expand a little bit into the foreign relations realm. Obviously, with everything going on in Israel, Gaza, the Iranian nuclear deal a few years ago, that was probably front and center in a lot of conversations up until October 7th. Anything new on that front that the broader industry and other stakeholders might be interested in?
Yeah, as you know, I was the lead dog opposing the JCPOA 2 administrations ago when I was in this administration. And look, Iran as a country is unique. The one thing that gives me hope is that 70% or 75% of the population is under 35 years old, and they had no use for the radical religious people that are running that country. So there's support there. As far as the regime that's there, they can't be trusted. You can't deal with them. There's no moderates. They shouldn't be dealing with them. John Kerry and I were round as he was negotiating that. And look, everybody saw them haul these piles of cash on pallets in Iran. Now we're seeing it coming back out from Hezbollah and from Hamas. Disgusting. But in any event, I'm thinking maybe there's people that learned their lesson. You just can't deal with these people. Other people in the region are going to wind up, I think, dealing with them much more than we can or should.
When you were a state senator,
I'm sure I let somebody else answer.
anybody else have a question? I have all these things, but now I got you on the spot. We have a gentleman right here.
Hey, good morning, Senator. My name is Richard Kidd. I just retired as the Senior Energy Executive for the Department of Defense. I've had the pleasure of testifying in front of your committee a couple of times, and I really appreciate your strong support for nuclear power. I agreed with all of your remarks, every single thing you said, but I noted an omission. All right, while you said clean, you did not say climate change. You acknowledge the reality that the sentiment around nuclear power has changed significantly the last 10 years, and I would submit that's because of the recognition of the world's need to decarbonize. We don't get there without nuclear power. So those forces concerned about climate change and decarbonization are bringing money, advocacy, and political support to advance nuclear power. So my question for you is, are you willing to acknowledge climate change? Are you willing to work in a bipartisan manner to bring all the resources to bear so that we don't experience the failure, which you mentioned in your remarks, as being unacceptable?
Yeah, I'm reluctant to undertake science discussion with all the scientists here in the room. But first of all, you can't deny climate change. Climate change has been around since he said, "Let there be light." It happens every day and it happens all day long. In addition to that, if you look through the history, we've been here 5 billion years. Now, my mind can't think about 5 billion. When you look at when they do diagrams, like my favorite one, they had one over at one of the museums here that showed how long the Earth had been around, and had this long sidewalk that was about a block long, and then it had various things on it. And us as human beings have been around about 140,000 years, and it was that you could barely see it as a hairline on the end. But you look at the studies they've done over time. I mean, the climate has warmed, it's cooled, it's warmed, it's cooled, and there is no doubt, nobody can deny that we're in a time when the climate is changing. I say this, and knowing that people will guffaw at it, my undergraduate degree was in forestry, so I'm science trained. I understand the scientific method. The scientific method, of course, is you do a theory, and then you back the theory up with experiments, and you repeat those experiments, and when you're all done, you can prove it. What we have is clearly a problem of the climate changing, and what's causing that? The theory is that it is the greenhouse gases that are releasing. Great theory. Great theory. Maybe right. And I'm ready to sign on to that 100%. As soon as somebody explains to me what caused the prior heating issues that we've been through over the 5 billion years, and we've been through some ones where the Earth was really, really warm in the time of the dinosaurs. Now, I don't know much about that, but I know we didn't cause it because we weren't around. The sun, I think, plays an important part in here. What happens on the chemical reactions on the sun and the physical reactions on the sun, and we don't know anything about that. So, having said that, I'm all in for reducing carbon. We need to reduce carbon, and you're absolutely right. We are getting people. The guy who was head of Greenpeace, who at one time was trying to set himself on fire because of nuclear power, is embracing nuclear power because of the reduction in carbon. It is something we can and we should sell. And there's a whole generation coming up of people that have heard from the time they were in kindergarten that if we don't reduce carbon, we're all gonna die pretty soon.
Okay, next question. Yeah, over here.
Hi, Senator. Thank you for coming. My name is Dan Leone. I'm a reporter with the Exchange Monitor here. And, when we're not talking about energy security like today, we have a particular focus on radioactive waste because that's a part of having nuclear power. And I was wondering whether, as you talk to folks from just about every country, here in the U.S., we are at a decades-long impasse dealing with the safe and permanent storage of radioactive waste. I wonder how outsiders looking in view that. Do they think it's a problem that we don't have an example to show them from a perspective of safety and closing the fuel cycle and from non-proliferation?
That's a really great question. Interestingly enough, when I talk about nuclear energy with people in other countries, they almost never talk about this issue that you're talking about. We Americans wring our hands over it all the time. We built this great big $5 billion hole in Nevada, and now won't use it. But I can tell you that they don't poke me. They don't ask about it. It just isn't a discussion because we all know that in other countries they have a different way of handling it than we do, and a lot of them store right on site where it's used, and it just isn't an issue. I don't find you probably deal with it more than I do, but they never come to me and say, "Hey, what are you going to do about your nuclear waste?" We get people in the U.S. that ask me that question, but I never get that from foreign countries. But great question.
Okay, Senator, we've got I think we're good on time.
Yeah,
We'll do one final question.
I'm okay if you're okay. Staff is sweating a little bit.
Senator, thank you for coming. We appreciate your leadership. Is there an appetite in Congress for regulatory framework that's tiered to the different designs of reactors that are coming online, coming available to us? It seems to me that the current framework from NRC is too rigid for the innovation that we need to accelerate. Is there any appetite in Congress for legislation that would mandate a new structure?
That's a great question. And I'm not surprised from industry I would get somebody complaining about the rigidity of the agency. However, to warm your little heart, I can tell you that up on the Hill, we share the same view that you have of this. And I don't know about an appetite for changing it. You know, doing regulatory legislation, particularly in an area that is as complex as this, is not a strong suit for Congress, if indeed they have a strong suit. I think there's nobody leading a path forward to it. We do hear complaints all the time about the agencies. We did in fact, maybe some of you in the room were at this, or at least your CEOs, where we had a summit. Where's Ryan White?
Is there?
Or when was that we had Mark Warner's summit? In June. That was one of the most interesting meetings I've been to since many years I've been here in Congress. But we had in the entire range of the industry, from the manufacturing to the regulatory to the fuel. Everybody was there, and it was interesting because most meetings I go to in DC are usually a full contact sport, if I can put it gently. This was not. This was everybody pulling the wagon in the same direction. And one of the things that those of us who were sitting up front, the senators, we were fully expecting to hear industry wail on the regulatory structure. They did not. Indeed, some of them were actually complimentary of the regulatory structure, which probably wasn't totally surprising since the regulators were sitting in the room. But nonetheless, we invited them every way we could to make suggestions along the line that you just hinted at, and it didn't come. And that's something that was really surprising to us. But anyway, that's about all I can tell you on it. We all consider it a huge problem, but we gave industry the opportunity right there to tell us how really big a problem it was, but more importantly, what we could do about it. We really didn't get a push that we were all hoping to get. Thank you. Great question.
Okay, we've got, well, we have a question right up front.
Yeah, just Myron Kazmarski with Voltec. Politically, what can be done with Turkey or Egypt as they continue to cooperate with Russia with regards to nuclear? We're talking about nuclear energy security. As they continue to cooperate with Russia.
We better extend this for about another hour. Look, Turkey's a huge problem. Well, Turkey is. One person in Turkey is a huge problem. And I deal with them all the time. They're a NATO partner, and I use that word tongue-in-cheek to a degree with Turkey. They're holding hands with Russia under the table. We all know that. I've got a hold of them. They paid and built 5 F-35s, and I've got a hold of them. They're sitting here. They're all paid for, and they haven't been delivered for years. They're just sitting here. And they bought S-400 rockets from Russia. And I sat like this with Erdogan really closer and told him, those F-35s are not leaving America until you get rid of the S-400s. And he was belligerent. He pushed back. He was angry. Told me we were in getting into their sovereignty. I said, when you join a club like NATO, you give up part of your sovereignty. And one is, you do what the club was put together for, and that is push back on Russia. Anyway, they like doing business with Russia, but it's Erdogan himself that leads the charge on that. There's going to be a post-Erdogan Turkey, and some people say it's going to be a lot like it is because it might be one of his clones. I'm not so sure of that, but we're looking forward to that day. And Russia, look, on a separate track, Russia is really going to suffer from what they did in Ukraine. I mean, they have lost everything they gained from the time they were building when the wall came down. We all thought that they were going to get on the national stage and be an honest player, at least as much as they can be. They poison people once in a while, they interfere in elections, but those things happen. But we all thought it was that we could deal with them, and we did. The Europeans made a much bigger mistake than we did, which they admit, by tying all of their fuel supply to them. What they did in Ukraine is now proven that they are untrustworthy, and they will be untrustworthy for generations to come. I deal with the Ukrainians daily, and I'm telling you, they're angry, they're hurt. These people are not dummies. They are a Western-leaning and looking society. They're going to see that the world remembers this for a long, long time. And Russia's going to pay a horrendous price for this. They really are. Listen.
Thank you for your efforts. I've had family fighting in Ukraine. So.
Yeah, there you go.
One more, and we're done.
The lady's back here.
Yeah. Okay.
She's been trying to get it.
Maureen, you can just project, I think.
Yes, thanks, Senator, for your very informative remarks. My name is Maureen Coates. I'm a former counsel to the Senate Energy Committee. I would like to reframe one of the prior questions. As you're passing legislation to secure the fuel supply, uranium fuel supply, do you consider the safely stored, totally reusable and recyclable uranium assets in the United States to be a source of that future energy?
Well, I do, but I'm not sure everybody does. I don't, in my mind, I have no doubt that our innovation here in America is going to figure out a way to reuse this fuel. So that's not an issue with me at all as far as believing that. I'm not so sure everybody does, but if they're not, I think it's foolish because this is today, tomorrow is going to be another day. Thanks for pointing that out. Great question.
Senator,
Thanks so much, Frank. Thank you.
thank you all for